Okay, everyone. Well, welcome to today's guest lecture speaker series. I am very pleased to introduce Clint Smith as our speaker today. Clint and I go way back. He actually was my mission president when I served as a missionary in Tallahassee, Florida, and so yeah, we had a really good time out there. So Clint is a lawyer. He specializes in, well, back in the day, helping out businesses to just get formed and get started. And Clint, as we were just going to talking, it sounds like you've moved more into just estate planning and.
Yeah, I still do business consulting, but it's mostly estate planning now. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. So a lot of experience there. So yeah, Clint is currently in Arizona. He has his. Are you part of a practice, or do you?
I have just my own little law firm. It's me and my paralegal. It's called Clint W. Smith PC, which stands for Professional Corporation. So we'll talk about some of those things as part of it.
That's awesome. That's great. So, and I'm pretty sure you've done that within the last 2 years, right?
Well, I've actually had my professional corporation for 27 years now. And so off and on over the years, I've been on my own. Sometimes I'm with a law firm. I've done that periodically too. I did that when I first came home from my mission 16 months ago. And now I'm back out doing my own thing again.
Wow. So y'all, this is completely incredible because for those of you who aren't familiar with how missions are run within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the mission presidents, what Clint did is they give up their professional careers, everything, for about 3 years. Pretty much got rid of everything. I believe you guys sold your house, your cars, and everything just to move out to Florida. So it was a pretty huge sacrifice, and then to be able to come back and pretty much just start over again is a pretty big deal. So Clint's a pretty awesome guy. So I will say this too, Clint, he's living a great life, and he's had a great life in his past as well. He used to perform in rock bands and performed in 3 different states. Is that right?
Yeah. I was a singer and a little bit of guitar and a trumpet player, so still do all those a little bit.
Okay.
But no more performing publicly as such.
That'd be awesome. Well, hey, if you ever, I don't know, put anything on Spotify, you have to let us know.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, that's I believe is as much as I'd like to leave with the introduction. So, Clint, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit more and
yeah, thanks.
What you're doing.
So, yeah, I have been practicing law here in Arizona for 35 years. I actually went to law school on a dare from a friend and decided that I would see if I could get a law degree and do something with it. My original intention was to work in government. I was going to go work in Washington, D.C., or maybe join the FBI or something, and ended up doing a lot of different things. But what I've really enjoyed most in my law practice over this whole time is helping people pay attention to things they should pay attention to, and help them so they don't get in trouble with the law, and so they don't lose a lot of their assets if something goes wrong or if they have a lawsuit, to give them some representation to help them out if they do have trouble. And so it's a really fulfilling career path to help others, to show them how the law isn't the terrible thing that they worry about. If it's set up properly, and we do have a great system here, people have rights, and there are sometimes tragic consequences. There are some really sad things that happen, but when you know how to use the law to help people out, it really is a fulfilling thing. So part of what I have looked at for all these years is to help people who run their own businesses get it organized so that they don't get in trouble, so that they can reduce their tax liability, and so that they can have the comfort of knowing that if suddenly they pass away, that business can be taken care of, and and what they built will not just disappear, but the value of that will pass on to their loved ones. So I've built a career around that, and there are people here in my practice currently that still do need that, some organization in their business. But what I've transitioned into is mostly just doing the estate planning part, which is wills and trusts and things like that, so that when they become disabled or they pass away, it's easy to administer and doesn't have to go to court. So I've been doing all of that for 35 years now, and love it. It's a very fulfilling path. So do you want me to just give an overview of of some of the business issues, or how do you want to do this, Micah?
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you for giving that introduction. For those of you who are watching, if you could send in your questions as Clint gives his presentation, that would be great. And what I told Clint is that you guys usually ask really good questions, and so we would just continue to just a discussion after he gives this short introduction about business law and what is essential to get like a company started. So yeah, Clint, would you mind going ahead and letting us know more about that?
So virtually every country in the world has some kind of a way to do that, to set up a business. And of course, I'm not familiar with the other countries, but I can tell you that there is a format out there. And the reason they do that, there's multiple reasons, but one of the reasons they do that is so that the public can have some confidence that the people they're giving their money to will take good care of it and actually perform a service or give them a product. If you don't have that kind of a basic foundation structure, you just don't, it doesn't succeed, and the economy can't go anywhere. So that's why they have these organizations, these businesses that are usually registered somehow with a government, and it tells the world who's in charge, what it's set up to do, and authorizes them. The government doesn't certify them. It doesn't say, okay, that business we are telling you is 100%, reliable. The governments don't do that. Other people do that, but it is a place where if you deal with a business entity, you can at least look it up and you can see that they are a legitimate business that's actually set up under the laws of the state or country that they're in. And that's a really important foundation, because if you don't have that, people are going to say, well, why should I give you any money? How do I know what you're going to do with it? Who are you? and people get duped all the time. There's all kinds of scams out there. So one word to the wise is, if you're asked to do business with somebody or you're thinking about it, go look it up, find out, do some research on how they're set up, where they're set up, whether they're set up as a recognizable business. There are sometimes private companies that are out there that will evaluate businesses. Here in the U.S., we have a thing called the Better Business Bureau, and for people that do business with businesses, if they have a good experience, they can report that, and the Better Business Bureau says these guys have a high rating. And if a lot of people say, wait a minute, I paid to buy a product and I never got the product, or I ordered a service and they never did it, that gets on there too, and then they can know that's not a business that people want to do business with. So you got to do some research, and you can find out, first of all, if you create a business, you want that business to be to have that kind of a reputation that people can count on. And if you're going to do business with others, you want to check them out before you go too far into it. So that's the first thing. Any questions on any of that so far?
One sec, let me pull this up. We have a question from Matthew. It's sort of related, but what he asked is, can a good lawyer be a good Christian? Can I just say this? It's like, because growing up, I always heard this joke, and it was like, where liars go, and usually you say hell, and I was like, but then I heard another joke, and it was like, where do liars go? And it's like law school. So,
ouch.
So maybe I shouldn't share that in front of you right now. So, but yeah.
I understand. I don't take offense. I do understand why people have a bad opinion of lawyers. Mostly, I gotta say, the colleagues that I know, I may not always agree with their strategies, and I kind of get ticked off when it seems like, for example, they're running up their bill or, just doing something that seems out of line with Christian faith and values. But that's pretty rare. The problem comes because, as I talked about before, somebody really should represent people who maybe they made a mistake. I, for one, just so you know, don't do criminal law. I would have a really hard time going to court and saying, you know, for whatever reason, my guy should not go to jail or have any consequences because he's a good guy, even if he did something really terrible. I can't do that. But I'm appreciative of the lawyers that do help with that and just make sure that the governments and the policing is done the way it should be done, so that everybody has their fair day in court. We rely on that. That system is in place. It's a really important system, and I'm just glad that somebody else is doing that for people who actually are guilty, because that's not something I could do. Now, as for being a Christian, I've got to say, I mean, I've been doing this for 35 years. There's been situations where I could easily have said, okay, well, this isn't the most ethical thing I've ever seen or done, but there's no harm here, so I'm just going to go ahead and do it. I haven't given into that. And lots of people that I know are really good Christians and have lived by, the golden rule, do unto others, right? As you would have them do unto you, because that's the right thing to do, even if it's not the financially, rewarding thing to do. You can still do the right thing, and it may not get you as far in your career as you'd like to be. I'm willing to pay that price, and so are lots of others. There are those, though, that basically sell their soul and say, I don't care. I'm just going to do what I want to do. I've known lawyers that could literally take off their Christian hat as soon as they went into the law office, and now they're going to do whatever they need to do to make money. And then when they leave the office, they go back and put on that Christian hat and go to church and whatever. I have known people like that, and they're going to be in all businesses, by the way, not just lawyers. But that's just a thought. So the bottom line is, yes, it is possible, and yes, there are wonderful, good Christian lawyers out there who live their faith all the time, not just when they're doing church and community things.
Yeah, and if I could just top what you've said, it's just a good practice in general if you're ever doing business with someone, or as a lawyer, just to look into them. Like the Better Business Bureau is a good example. There's other review sites. What someone says in front of you, like they're gonna tell you what you want to hear, but it's always just a good practice to review them. So I think that's a great response.
And the internet has actually given us lots of ways to check on that. You can get peer reviews. You can get reviews from other people who have dealt with that person, on all kinds of places. So I do recommend doing homework, not just with lawyers, of course, but with anybody, before you go talk to them. And I personally like the reviews from real people rather than what the business says about itself.
Yeah, exactly. And on a side note, that's also a very important part of business too, and we'll be getting into that in later curriculum for those of y'all in Ghana. But finding reviews from customers, what Clint just mentioned, like that's a lot more powerful than just you talking about your business, but have other people actually share their experiences.
Yeah.
So,
I found that to be the very best way to build my business. Somebody likes what I did for them. I ask them to post a review for me on one of the several sites that you can do that, and it goes a long way.
That's great. Okay, so we just had another question come in. This is from Mark, and he asked, does the government help you to establish your business as well if you pay your taxes?
Not where we are, not in the U.S. I'm not sure about other places, but the government gives you the direction, the place to register your business or whatever it is, but generally speaking, they don't do it for you. So you have to figure out how to do that yourself. Sometimes they have good self-help information that you can get, from the government online or wherever. And occasionally you'll run into somebody who works in a government office. If you could go to government offices these days, you can find somebody who could actually be kind and kind of show you what you need to know and what you need to do and walk you through it. That happens too. But I don't know of any governments that actually do the whole process for you. You just kind of go online or go to the office and do it, fill out forms and such. And yeah, paying taxes is all fine and dandy. We are paying for those people who work there in that office, right? But they're not there to give you the advice. They're just there to process the paperwork.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that too, yeah, I mean that's just a common thing with all governments. I mean, it's usually a pretty simple form. It depends on actually the government entity you're trying to register. At least what I know of the ones here in the U.S. Like the one I've been actually creating for this organization for Firewall. It's really simple. It's really straightforward. And if you guys are interested in actually like starting up those entities, I'm sure we could start up a program here within Firewall. It shouldn't be that hard. We couldn't give like official like legal advice, but we could help each other out and go from there. So
yeah, and I have absolutely no problem. Back to maybe part of this is to that question about being a Christian. If somebody doesn't need a lawyer, I'm not going to say you need to hire me. I'm going to say, you know what? There's a really easy form. Just go online and fill it out, and they're very grateful for that. So I've done that a lot. So yeah, not everything needs to have somebody else filling it out. A lot of things is just common sense, and you can do it yourself.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so we don't have any questions so far, but
okay.
No more questions at least. But
let's just talk about now when you're doing business. There was a day a long time ago when you could count on just being able to talk to somebody. Maybe you'd shake hands, and that was the deal. You didn't have to write up anything. My friends, those days are long gone. And maybe especially if it's a friend, or especially the friend of a friend that you're going to be doing business with, get it in writing. You need to write down what each party is going to do, what the relationship is going to look like. Honestly, it takes a few extra minutes. Usually, I mean, it depends on how complicated it is, but this can be really simple to just write it up, and then both of you sign it, make a copy so everybody knows what's to be expected, so that when you get into the nitty-gritty details of whatever it is you're doing together, everybody knows what to expect, and then you can hearken back to that and you say, look, this is what it says. I personally had a situation years ago where I was working with a friend who was a contractor, and he was going to do some remodeling on my house. And he's like, oh, this will be, this many dollars or whatever. We'll just do it. And I said, okay, that's great. Can we just write that up? And he's like, what? I'm your friend. Why should I have to write this up? And I said, well, I've been a lawyer. This is what I've taught to do. I have seen train wrecks my whole career, and I want to make sure that we have this in writing. So we write up a little thing that says I'm going to do A, B, C, and it's going to be this many dollars. Well, we got into that contract a few months, and it was way, way over budget, like 5 times over budget. And so we had a little discussion, and I had to go back to that piece of paper and say, look, this is where we were, and we negotiated, worked out something, but he'd totally forgotten. Oh yeah, I guess I did tell you that back in the day. That's what we were going to do, and this is what it was going to cost. Because people, and there was no malintent, there wasn't anything bad there, but he was just one of those guys that goes by the seat of his pants, and he was just going to say, oh yeah, if we're going to do that, this and the other, that's only whatever X dollars. You can't count on that. You can't count on that. So write it down. That's my best advice for doing almost just about any kind of business. I mean, obviously, if you're, buying an ice cream cone somewhere, you don't get a contract for that because that's an immediate exchange, right? But anything else you're doing in business, I would say get it in writing. That's a really important thing.
And I would just like to clarify this for all the viewers. You don't have to be a lawyer to write out and just say, hey, you're going to do this, and you're going to pay me this, or I'm going to do this for you, and then you're going to pay me this in exchange, right? Right.
Write it up in whatever way you both understand it and can agree to it. Doesn't have to be a lawyer. That's right.
Yeah,
in fact, most of those things can be done just between people, regular people that don't need to have a lawyer.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Yeah, guys, yeah, I bring that up because that was one of the interesting things that I found in my business law class in a previous semester. I was like, what? That's crazy. So, like I say, there are a lot of things that you can do without a lawyer getting started. It's like writing up contracts. But I would imagine that for when you get, like when you grow as a business, it's really effective and really needed to have like a good lawyer who can actually like write out and like, kind of fill in the fine details for bigger deals and such.
Yeah, especially if you're going to do the same kind of deal over and over and over again. Pay somebody to write it up once and use that form, all the time.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, we're just having some more questions. I'm just reading through them real quick.
Okay.
Okay, so Abraham just asked, is the Better Business Bureau just for business brands rating, or is there more to why they exist? So yeah, does the Better Business Bureau, do they do anything other than just?
I don't think so. I think that's the whole reason they exist, is to give the public information that can be shared about businesses. That's all it is.
Great. Okay, let's see. Sorry, I'm just reading a question by Alvin. If you could clarify your question, I'm just a little bit confused by that. Okay, but Clint, could you tell us a little bit more about what a business should be concerned about when they first get started? Maybe talk a little bit about liability. Is it essential for them to register from day one?
Not necessarily. Some businesses start very small, and so you just, start doing your thing, whatever it is. And no, it depends on the laws. You do want to find out if there's, for example, sales tax, though. If you're doing some kind of transaction that you're selling something, don't get in trouble with that, because of every little town, every little county, every city, every state, every country has some kind of sales tax where you need to report your sales. And we have a thing called the swap meets here, which other people call flea markets and whatever. You go out there and you sell stuff for cash, and you're supposed to, keep track of all of that and then pay the sales tax after to the state or county and whoever. Well, not everybody does that, and those that get caught are in big trouble. They can be shut down for their business, and they can be, have their assets attached, and all kinds of terrible things. So that's one thing to look at. Find out if there's a tax implication. But if they're, as far as setting up the entity itself, you don't necessarily have to do that right off the bat in most cases. But if you find that it's going to be a successful business and you're going to be, running it for a while, I would recommend doing what you can, because then you can start taking advantage of the tax laws and taking as expenses. You can pay for your cell phone through your business, or your rental space that you have to use for whatever you're doing. There's all kinds of expenses, and you can take out if you have a business that's set up. So that's one thing to think about. As far as the other kinds of liabilities, depends on what you're doing. I had a client the other day who has a business where he supplies gravel, rocks to golf courses. And so I found out that he's got 2 big dump trucks, and the guys that are driving those dump trucks are basically retired truck drivers. They're like over 70 years old. And they're driving them from the quarry to the golf course, which is anywhere from 5 to 30 miles. And that's a huge liability. That's a huge exposure. So I talked to him about who owns those trucks, and they're in his personal name. Do you have insurance? Well, I just have my little, bit of automobile coverage. That's not enough, because if that happens, if there's an accident, somebody's really going to get hurt badly by those huge, heavy trucks, and now you got a big exposure. So insurance is important. Also, ownership of how those are set up. for example, in Arizona and in most, I think all states now in the US, we have a thing called a limited liability company. And most countries, I think, have some kind of equivalent. And basically what that does is anybody who wants to sue or have a claim against the company can only get to whatever assets are in the company. And they can't come past that to the owners of the company. That's what the limited liability part of that is. So that's an important reason, again, to organize. So those are two things that actually help you with that liability part. You got your insurance and the way it's organized.
That's great. Thank you for answering that. Okay, so we have two questions that have come in from a man named Jerry Corboy. So these are completely different, but what he said is, I understand that you served a full-time mission as a mission president. Did you ever send any of your missionaries home for disobeying mission rules? If yes, how did you feel about it? And if you wouldn't mind also sharing about that as well, I think this might be good to also discuss just in general, like just in business, like sometimes you have to fire people, or sometimes you have to let people go, and what is that process like? And then once you answer that, we can get into the second question that he asked.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to say too much about the mission part, because the short answer is not just for disobeying mission rules. It goes far beyond that. There were things that happened that are way beyond just mission rules that had to do with things that you would otherwise, need to talk to church leaders about. So I had those a couple of times, and that's it. It was not a big thing in our mission, fortunately. As far as employees go, I've had some really bad experiences. I've had people steal from me. I had somebody intercept a credit card once, and they started charging things. I had a secretary that started running a little business at night in my office using my forms on my computers, running her own clients. And just stuff like that happens. When I find out about those, of course, I take action. You can't just let that go. So I have, let people go immediately and just have that sit down face-to-face conversation with them. And then in the U.S., we have some pretty kind of technical laws on what I can say to people in the future. If somebody calls me and wants a recommendation for that person, what can I say? And I got to be really careful about that. And the easiest question is, would you hire that person again? And if I say no, that's all they need to know, and that would be the end of the conversation. I rarely got those calls for those people because they would not put me on their resume as somebody who ought to be contacted. But I did get a couple of them. So yeah, you got to do that. You got to pay attention to your business. If there's somebody you really trust that's running your business, you still need to have the ability to double check everything. You have two sets of eyes on all of the transactions and on the bank accounts. And so you're monitoring each other, because people can take advantage and will. Unfortunately, they will. And you do have to do something about that. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think that was a pretty good answer. Okay, so Jerry, his second question was, many of us really want to start our own business in Africa in the future. What will be your counsel to us?
Well, find something that you like, for one thing. Don't just go into a business because it sounds like it might make a lot of money. When you get into a business, you're going to be in it every day. And if you don't like it, it's going to get old really fast. I've been practicing law for 35 years. I do not do it for the money. I do it because I like helping people. So that's the first thing. And then when you decide to do it, do some research first. Before you invest a lot of time or money into a new business, do some research and see if you can determine if there's a need for what you want to do, if it will succeed. And that looks different ways depending on what kind of different place where you live or what kind of business it is. But you got to know, and you don't have to know perfectly. I mean, Bill Gates, and those guys that were building computers in their garage back in the 80s, they did not know what exactly it was going to look like, but they did something they liked, and maybe they had a little glimpse of what, Microsoft and Apple were going to be someday. I don't know. I kind of doubt it, but they did what they liked. And then they started figuring out how to make money with what they liked. That would be the ideal in my book, if you can figure that out. And then just go through the hoops. Make sure you're registered. You get your sales tax. You get your contracts in writing. The basic things like that we've talked about.
That's great. And if you don't mind me asking, if you don't mind me just adding to that question, with your experience of the companies that you've worked with throughout the years, you've probably seen a lot fail. There's a statistic, I'm not sure how true it is, but it's like 90% of startups fail within the first year. And so have there been any qualities that you've noticed in startup companies that have helped them to succeed as compared to the 90% that haven't?
Well, startups, that's a whole another world out there, because nobody really knows if you've got a startup and you've got this great idea, whether it's one of those great ideas that's really going to fly and take off, or one of those that's just nobody wants. And there's no statistics on it. You can't really do a whole lot of research, so you just kind of have to go by faith. But one thing I've learned is you got to know whether you're qualified for something. For example, I had a guy in my office one day, and this was when I was doing a lot of bankruptcy work. Serious financial difficulty, had hundreds of thousands of dollars of student loan debt because he had gone to medical school, and because he could not get into a medical school in the United States, he went what we call offshore to medical school, and still had to pay. He had like $350,000 of debt. And then when he graduated, he couldn't pass the board to be a doctor. And so he's working a regular job that was nowhere near enough to pay for the student loans that he had. Somebody could have and should have told that guy long ago, you know what? I know you're a nice guy, but why don't you take the hints that if you can't do well enough on the tests or get grades good enough to get into a decent medical school, then there's a decent chance you're not going to be able to, practice as a doctor. Somebody could have told him that. And it's hard because some people say, I don't care what everybody else thinks. I know I can do it, and so I'm going to do it. So beware of that attitude. If everybody around you is telling you, no, I'm not telling you quit or give up or change course or whatever, but at least consider it and think rationally. I mean, this guy rationally could have said, you know what, I'm probably really not that cut out to be a doctor. Another guy that I had was a principal or an executive of a charter school, what we call a charter school, which is a private school not run by the government. He could barely carry on a regular conversation and really had no business in my mind being an educator at all, let alone running a school. And that school struggled and failed. And so, there are limits. There are things that we can do and should do, and we need to love it, but we also need to be realistic on what our abilities and capabilities are. So I would just watch for that.
Okay, thank you. That's a great response. So we just had another question come in. It's from Susanna, and Susanna, I hope I'm getting your question right. If not, please feel free to message me back. But I believe what she's asking is it needed to do you need to have a business plan or you contact a lawyer or I guess have a business plan before you set up your business entity?
Well, good question. There is a thing called a business plan, and if you're going to get people to invest in your business, you'll need that. It needs to lay out, this is what I plan to do, this is why I think it can work, and this is what it's going to cost, this is what I think I can make. It's very specific. That's one kind of business plan, and if you want to ask other people to invest in your business, you probably need something like that. But if you're just doing your own business, you kind of do it in a more informal way. You can just write up your own guidelines of what you think it's going to take. And I would be very honest with myself. Make a sheet that has one column that says, these are the pros. This is the reason I should do this. These are the cons, the risks that are there. And just seriously and objectively evaluate those two things and decide, is this something I should really try? And then, if you say that it is, then now that you've thought about and you know what the possible risks are, then you could say, okay, well, I want to start working on this, and my plan will include A, B, and C things I'm going to do in order to overcome those challenges. So you do need to be organized and deliberate about it, but you don't necessarily, for that purpose, need a formal business plan. I've got about 5 minutes left, Micah.
Okay, awesome. So maybe we'll just wrap up with this last question, and then just finish up with final thoughts. But Abraham asked, what have the secret ingredients been that you've spent in the past 35 years of what you do? So over the past 35 years of your law practice, have you found like any secret ingredients to success to your business or personal life?
So here's the thing. You can't just say, at least I don't think, you should say, this is what I'm doing. I'm never going to change. It's going to be that way. If you're not flexible, you will not succeed. So I have transformed my practice multiple times in my career. I've worked with firms a couple of times. I've done some other things. I've tried some other areas of law. And honestly, where I am now is where I would have never dreamed to be 20 years ago. I would have looked at this as a really boring thing, just doing wills and trusts, because I liked, going down and, defending people and litigating and going to court and all that stuff. And I looked at the guys that were doing this in their little offices as just these boring old people. Well, I don't mind being that boring old guy now, and so the bottom line is, be prepared to adjust to whatever happens, and don't think that you've got the secret sauce that's going to answer all the questions. If there is a secret sauce, it is to be flexible and to look at alternatives and ways to grow your business or to sprout to another direction, or maybe just completely change directions. Don't be too set in your ways. That I guess would be the short answer to that.
That's great. Thank you for the response. Well, I do know that you need to get headed off like in about just a few minutes. So, Clint, do you have any final words that you'd like to share with us about just starting a business and inspiration?
I love that we're even having this conversation. Don't let anything that I've said scare you off. I hope it doesn't, because this is how you can make a better life for yourself. You can be happier if you really pursue something that you're interested in and you do it in the ways that we talked about. It can be really great. It's a way better way to go, in my view, than just working for somebody else. I have worked for somebody else a little bit in my life, but most of my career, of that, I've seen people have really great success doing that. I've got 3 of my kids that are doing that now, and just go after it. If it's something you love and you do the homework, don't be shy about it, and don't be afraid, because you can accomplish the good things you want to. Just make sure you're qualified for it and you really like it.
That's great. Thank you for that. Well, Clint, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate your counsel, especially your answer to those questions. Those were really amazing responses. So
thanks. My pleasure.
Awesome. Well, take care and stay safe during COVID-19, okay?
Okay, thanks. See you, everybody. See you, Micah.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.